My parents left me a rundown house in a remote corner of Montana as an inheritance, while my brother inherited their beautiful home in the capital. My wife called me weak and threw me out, telling me not to return until I stood up for myself. I drove to Montana, heartbroken and curious, but when I stepped inside the house, what I found left me stunned. I drove to Montana, my heart full of hurt and curiosity, never expecting that this house would change my entire life. Hello. My name is Brooks Anderson, 42 years old. I work as a banker at a small branch in Lincoln, Nebraska. My life, if I had to describe it, is like a quiet river. Calm, predictable, but never truly vibrant. I'm not the kind of person who likes talking about himself, but since you're here I'll try to help you understand who I am and why I'm standing in front of this crumbling house holding a set of rusty keys, my heart swirling with mixed emotions. I grew up in Lincoln in a middle-class neighborhood with identical houses, white walls, red-tiled roofs and neatly trimmed lawns. My parents William and Mary Anderson were simple people. My father was an auto mechanic and my mother was an elementary school teacher. They loved us, Spencer and me, but it wasn't a loud kind of love. They taught us to be kind, to yield and to always put family first, but there was always something missing, a piece I couldn't quite name. My parents rarely spoke about our family's roots. I only knew bits and pieces gleaned from half-told stories that my great-grandfather was part of the Lakota tribe, a Native American people who once lived on the vast prairies of the Great Plains. My grandfather Joseph was the last in our family to hold some connection to that culture, but he passed away when I was too young to remember. My father, perhaps wanting us to blend into city life, never spoke much about my grandfather or our Lakota heritage. What little I knew came from vague stories that my great-grandfather was a skilled hunter, that my grandfather worked on a ranch near the Bighorn Mountains, and that our family left their ancestral lands to start anew in Nebraska. I don't blame my parents. They just wanted us to have an easier life free from the label of different in a city where Native Americans were often met with wary glances. But sometimes when I looked in the mirror and saw my dark brown eyes and thick black hair, I wondered, who am I really? Deep down a part of me yearned to connect with those roots, but I didn't know where to start. Spencer, my younger brother, was different. 4 years my junior, he was always the center of attention. Tall, handsome, with a smile that easily won people over. Spencer was ambitious, sharp and unafraid to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. When we were kids he always got the bigger slice of cake, the nicer toy and our parents' attention. I wasn't jealous, or at least I told myself I wasn't. I was the older brother and older brothers are supposed to give way. But sometimes I wondered if I was too weak, as Ellen often said. Ellen, just mentioning her name makes my heart tighten. We met 15 years ago at a mutual friend's party. She was the daughter of a well-off family from Omaha. A smart, decisive woman with sharp green eyes and perfectly styled blonde hair. Ellen was drawn to my gentleness, or so she said. You're different from other men, she told me. You're honest, dependable. I fell for her at first sight, loving how she made everything around her come alive. We married after 2 years of dating and her parents gifted us a small house in the Lincoln suburbs. A gift I was grateful for, but one that always made me feel indebted. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was stable. Ellen worked in real estate, always busy with contracts and meetings. I, on the other hand, was content with my desk job. I liked the calm of numbers, of balancing ledgers, but Ellen wanted more. She wanted me to climb the ladder to become the strong man she envisioned. Brooks, you can't keep letting people walk over you, she'd say, her voice laced with disappointment. You let Spencer push you around. You let your colleagues overtake you. Are you going to live your whole life as a nobody? I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to compete, didn't want to become a version of Spencer, but each of Ellen's words cut like a knife, making me doubt myself. Was I really weak? Had I let life pass me by without fighting for anything? Everything changed one March afternoon when I got a call from the hospital. My parents had died in a car accident on the highway. A truck had lost control and crashed into their car. I don't remember how I drove to the hospital, only that when I arrived I collapsed in the cold hallway, tears streaming uncontrollably. Spencer arrived after me, outwardly calm, but I saw his hands tremble as he signed the paperwork. The funeral was heavy with grief. Spencer and I barely spoke, exchanging only brief words about arrangements and visitors. Ellen stayed by my side holding my hand, but I sensed a distance in her eyes. Maybe she was disappointed that I wasn't showing the strength she expected. Maybe she thought I should do or say something to prove I was the older brother. A week later my parents' lawyer called us in to read their will. I didn't expect much. My parents weren't wealthy and I assumed their assets would be split evenly. But when the lawyer read the will, it felt like the ground fell out from under me. Mary and William Anderson leave their house in Lincoln, Nebraska along with all personal assets to their younger son, Spencer Anderson, the lawyer said in a steady voice. To Brooks Anderson, they leave a property in Stillwater County, Montana along with all its contents. I was stunned. The Lincoln house was where Spencer and I grew up, filled with memories of our parents. It was well maintained, Comfortable. Worth $1 million in today's market. The Montana house? I didn't even know it existed. My parents had never mentioned it, and I only vaguely recalled that my grandfather had lived somewhere in the mountains. Spencer looked at me, a cryptic smile tugging at his lips. Guess Mom and Dad knew you didn't like city life, he said, half joking, half serious. I didn't respond, just nodded, trying to hide the sense of injustice swelling inside me. Ellen, on the other hand, couldn't contain her anger. On the drive home, she exploded. You're okay with that, Brooks? A rundown shack in the middle of nowhere while Spencer gets the entire estate. You're the older brother and you let your little brother walk all over you like that. It was their wish, I said, my voice hoarse. I didn't want this, Ellen. Their wish? She let out a bitter laugh. Your parents clearly thought nothing of you and you. You don't even bother to fight. You're weak, Brooks. You've always been weak. Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I wanted to argue, to say I didn't need the house, that I just wanted to keep the peace with Spencer, but I couldn't say anything. Maybe deep down, I was afraid she was right. That night, Ellen kicked me out. She said she couldn't live with a man who didn't stand up for himself. Go, Brooks, she said, pointing to the door. Go to that worthless house of yours in Montana. Don't come back until you do something to prove you're a man. I didn't argue. I packed a few clothes, grabbed my car keys, and drove off into the night. I didn't know if I was running away or searching for something, but by morning I was on the highway heading toward Montana, the rusty keys the lawyer had given me weighing heavily in my pocket. The Montana house, according to the paperwork, was in a small town called Coldwater, nestled among mountains and endless pine forests. I'd never been there, but as I drove along the winding roads I felt something strange, like I was returning to a place I'd never left, or maybe I was just so tired, so hurt that my imagination was playing tricks on me. When I arrived, dusk was falling. The house loomed before me, a crooked silhouette in the fading light. It was smaller than I'd imagined, with peeling shingles, broken windows and vines crawling up the walls. But instead of feeling disappointed, I felt curious. There was something about this house, a secret waiting to be uncovered. I stepped out of the car, clutching the keys tightly. A cold wind blew through, carrying the scent of earth and pine. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. This was my inheritance, I thought, and whatever it was, I was determined to uncover the truth. I stepped forward, each step crunching the gravel beneath my boots. The bundle of keys in my hand felt heavy, cold, as if they carried the weight of the past secrets. The front door creaked as I inserted the key into the lock. I had to shove it with my shoulder to get it open, and a damp, musty smell of rotting wood and dust hit me. Inside, the fading light of dusk filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating a cracked wooden floor. An old table sat abandoned in the middle of the room next to a brick fireplace covered in ash and soot. There wasn't a single sign of life. No lights, no pictures, no trace of a family that once lived here. But instead of feeling disappointed, I felt a strange urge. This house was whispering to me, as if it knew I hadn't come just to look but to search. I set my backpack down and pulled out the flashlight I'd brought from Lincoln. Its pale yellow beam swept across the room, revealing hidden corners. The house wasn't large, just a living room, a small kitchen, and a hallway leading to a few other rooms. I walked through each one, my footsteps echoing like heartbeats in the stillness. The main bedroom was empty save for a rusty bed frame and a dusty old blanket. Another room seemed to be a storage space with a few rotting wooden crates scattered about. But when I pushed open the last door in the hallway, my heart began to pound. This door was different. It was made of solid oak, adorned with intricate carvings, images of eagles and suns, flowing lines like a river. I'd never seen anything like it in Nebraska. My hands trembled as I tried the keys in the lock, but none of them fit. I tried every key in the bundle, but the door wouldn't budge. A mix of frustration and curiosity drove me to keep going. I swept the flashlight around the door and noticed a small gap at the bottom corner. A secret entrance, perhaps. I knelt down, touched the gap, and felt a loose wooden panel. With a little effort, I pried it open, revealing a dark, narrow space. I crawled through, my heart pounding as if it might burst. Inside was a small room no bigger than a large closet. My flashlight illuminated dusty wooden shelves lined with objects I'd never seen before. There were pottery vases with intricate patterns, hides embroidered with vibrant threads, and an eagle feather headdress with pristine white plumes. In the corner stood an old wooden chest carved with the image of a wolf howling under a moon. My breath quickened. These weren't ordinary objects. They held a deeper significance, as if they were pieces of a larger story. I opened the chest carefully, as if afraid to break something precious. Inside was a leather-bound book, thick and heavy, its pages yellowed with age. I gently opened the first page and handwritten words appeared. To those who carry the blood of the Lakota, preserve and cherish. Below was my grandfather's signature, Joseph Anderson, and a date, August 15, 1947. A jolt ran through me. This was my family's legacy, not the crumbling house but what it concealed. I sat on the floor, flipping through the book's pages. It wasn't just a diary, it was a chronicle of my family, of the Lakota people. My grandfather wrote about my great-grandfather, a warrior named Wakantanka, Great Spirit in Lakota. He described the days when the tribe lived on the plains hunting buffalo and performing rituals under starry skies. He wrote of the losses when white settlers came, taking their land and forcing the tribe onto reservations. But above all, he wrote of resilience, how my great-grandfather hid these artifacts to protect them from theft so that one day his descendants could reclaim and continue the story of their people. I didn't realize tears were streaming down my face until they dripped onto the pages. I had never felt so close to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, or my tribe as I did in that moment. All those years growing up in Lincoln, I had lived as a stranger to my own roots, but now sitting in this dusty room I felt like I was being called by name. Not Brooks Anderson the banker, but Brooks, descendant of Wakantanka, bearer of Lakota blood. I spent the entire night examining the artifacts. Each one told a story. The eagle feather headdress my grandfather wrote was used in rainmaking ceremonies. The pottery vases held the ashes of fallen warriors hidden to avoid destruction by the U.S. Army. A small drum covered in deer hide still produced a resonant sound when I tapped it lightly. I didn't know their monetary value, but I knew they were priceless. They were history, the soul of a people I had never truly understood. The next morning I called an old friend Tom, an archaeologist at the University of Montana. I briefly told him about my findings and he agreed to come take a look. When Tom stepped into the room, his eyes lit up like a child discovering treasure. "Brooks, do you realize what you're sitting on?" he said, his voice trembling. "These artifacts, they could be worth millions of dollars, not just materially but for their historical significance. This is the legacy of the Lakota, the kind of thing museums around the world would pay a fortune to own." I was stunned. Millions of dollars? That kind of money could buy back the Lincoln House, pay off Ellen's debts and let me live comfortably. But even as the thought crossed my mind, I felt a deep resistance. These artifacts weren't for sale. They didn't belong in a museum or a collector's hands. They belonged to me, no, to my family, to the Lakota people. Tom left after promising to contact a native culture expert for further appraisal. I stayed in the house continuing to read my grandfather's book. With each page I learned more about the struggles my family had faced. My grandfather wrote about how my father William chose to leave Montana for Nebraska hoping his children would have an easier life, but he also wrote of his pain as he watched my father drift away from Lakota culture. "William thought assimilation was the only way to survive," he wrote, "but I know that if we forget our roots, we lose ourselves." Those words cut like a knife. I thought of my parents, how they avoided talking about my grandfather or the tribe. Perhaps they feared that mentioning the past would lead to discrimination for me and Spencer, but now I realized they were wrong. The past wasn't a burden. It was strength, identity. In the days that followed I began fixing up the house. I swept the floors, patched holes in the roof and cleaned the artifacts with the care one would give to precious gems. Each day I felt closer to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and the ancestors I'd never met but who now felt alive within me. I started having strange dreams of endless prairies, the sound of drums, a man with long braided hair standing on a hill gazing at the horizon. One afternoon as I was cleaning a pottery vase there was a knock at the door. I startled as Coldwater was a remote place and I hadn't seen anyone besides Tom since arriving. I opened the door to find an older man, his skin tanned, his silver hair tied in a braid. He wore a simple shirt, but his eyes were sharp as if they could see through to my soul. "I'm Samuel Black Elk," he said, his voice deep and steady. "Tom sent me. You're Brooks, Joseph Anderson's grandson?" I nodded and invited him in. Samuel stepped into the secret room and when he saw the artifacts his eyes glimmered with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Pride mixed with pain. He touched the eagle feather headdress, his fingers trembling. "Do you know how important these are?" he asked. "They're not just objects. They're the spirits of your ancestors, of our tribe." Samuel told me about the history of the Lakota, about the wars, the ceremonies, and how their culture was suppressed but survived through people like my grandfather. He said my grandfather had been a keeper of culture, hiding these artifacts to prevent them from falling into the hands of those who would erase the tribe's memory. "Joseph believed that one day someone from his line would find them," Samuel said, "and that someone is you." I felt a weight on my shoulders but also a fire igniting in my heart. I wasn't just Brooks the timid banker, I was a descendant of warriors, storytellers, people who lived and died to protect their culture, but not everything was easy. A week later Spencer showed up. He pulled up in a shiny SUV, striding into the house with his familiar confident smile. "Brother Brooks, I hear you found treasure?" he said, his tone half joking but his eyes calculating. "Tom told a friend and word got to me. Those artifacts are worth a fortune." My blood boiled. "They're not for sale, Spencer," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "They're our family's legacy, our tribe's." Spencer laughed loudly. "Legacy? Come on, don't be naive. Sell them, split the money, and you could live like a king. I'm willing to trade the Lincoln House for this one if you want." His offer shook me. The Lincoln House filled with memories of our parents, our childhood. Part of me wanted to agree to go back to Ellen, to my old life, but as I looked at my grandfather's book at the eagle feather headdress, I knew I couldn't. "No, Spencer," I said, my voice firmer than ever. "They don't belong to us to sell. They belong to the tribe." Spencer shook his head, looking at me like I was crazy. "You'll regret this, Brooks," he said before leaving. "You always regret your weakness." Spencer left, leaving me with a gnawing sense of unease. His offer, trading the Lincoln House for this one along with the priceless artifacts, was like a pebble tossed into a still lake, rippling thoughts I'd tried to bury deep. I sat in the secret room, still clutching my grandfather's leather-bound book, my eyes fixed on the eagle feather headdress hanging on the shelf. The flashlight's beam caught the white feathers, making them shimmer like tiny stars, but my mind wasn't here anymore. It was drifting back to Lincoln, to Ellen, to the life I once thought was enough. I stood and stepped out onto the porch. The night in Coldwater was frigid, the air carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The sky was ablaze with stars so bright I could make out every constellation. I'd never seen a sky like this in Nebraska, where city lights always dulled everything. Here it was clear, real, as if I stood at the heart of the universe. I wondered if my grandfather had ever stood here, gazing at this sky, feeling what I felt now. Had he ever faced temptations like the ones I was grappling with? The next morning I got a call from Ellen. Her voice over the phone wasn't as icy as it had been the last time we spoke. It was soft, almost tender, like when we first fell in love. "Brooks," she said, "I heard from Spencer about the things you found. Did you really find treasure?" I gripped the phone tightly, my heart pounding. "It's not treasure, Ellen," I replied, my voice hoarse. "It's a legacy. It belongs to our family, to the Lakota tribe." Ellen was quiet for a moment, then gave a soft laugh. "You're always so romantic, Brooks, but I'm more practical. If those things are worth millions like Spencer says, you could sell them. We could pay off our debts, buy a new house, travel the world. Don't you want that life? A life where we don't have to worry anymore?" Her words were like a sweet melody, conjuring images I'd once dreamed of. A bigger house, beach vacations, recognition from colleagues and family, but at the same time I felt a deep resistance. These artifacts weren't a winning lottery ticket. They were history, the soul of my ancestors. Selling them would mean betraying not just my grandfather but myself. "Ellen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you don't understand. These things aren't for sale. They mean more than money." She sighed, her tone turning sharp. "You're still the same, Brooks. Always idealizing everything. You think those old relics will change anything? They won't pay bills. They won't bring happiness. You're living in a foolish dream, and I'm tired of waiting for you to wake up." I wanted to argue, to tell her I'd found happiness, not in money but in connecting with my roots, but I stayed silent. Maybe because I knew no matter what I said, Ellen wouldn't understand. She didn't see what I saw, didn't hear what I heard in the wind rustling through the pines. "I'm coming to Montana," she said before hanging up. "I want to talk face to face. You can't keep running away forever." I stared at the darkened phone screen, feeling a storm approaching. Ellen always had a way of shaking me, making me doubt myself, but this time I was determined not to let that happen. I returned to the secret room, sitting before the wooden chest. I opened my grandfather's book again, seeking comfort in its words. He wrote of a time when my great-grandfather Wakantanka was tempted by an English trader who promised gold and silver for the tribe's sacred items. He refused even though the tribe was starving. "Money can buy food today," my grandfather wrote, "but only spiritual value sustains us through generations." Those words were like a flame, dispelling the darkness in my heart. I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself but for those who fought to preserve this legacy. Ellen arrived a week later on a drizzly afternoon. She wore a beige coat, her blonde hair tied high, looking both elegant and distant. Stepping into the house, she wrinkled her nose at the peeling wooden floor and cracked walls. "You're really living like this, Brooks?" she asked, her voice full of skepticism. "This isn't your home. It's just a pile of ruins." I didn't respond, leading her to the secret room. When she saw the artifacts, her eyes lit up, not with reverence but with calculation. She touched a pottery vase, her fingers tracing the patterns as if appraising it. "These things, they're beautiful," she said. "Are you sure they're worth a lot? If so, I know an auction house in New York we could make a fortune." "Ellen," I interrupted, my voice firm, "they're not for sale." She turned, her smile fading. "Are you serious? You're going to keep them here in this falling apart house to rot with you? Brooks, this is a chance to change our lives." "Your life, maybe," I said, looking her in the eye, "but not mine. I found my purpose. These artifacts aren't just objects. They're the history of my family, of the Lakota tribe. I feel a responsibility to protect them." Ellen shook her head, stepping closer and placing a hand on my shoulder. "You've changed, Brooks," she said, her voice softer. "I don't know you anymore, but I still want us to try again. Sell them and we can start over. I'll forgive everything. How you let Spencer walk over you. How you disappointed me. We could be happy. Her words were like a knife, but this time they didn't sway me. I gently removed her hand, feeling a newfound strength within. Ellen, I don't need your forgiveness. I said, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just doing what's right. If you can't accept that, then maybe we don't belong together. She stared at me.